Hey, greetings, everyone. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West here, the Executive Director of the American Constitutional Rights Union, and welcome to another episode of Live Free TV. I just want to announce to all of the folks back there in the Atlanta metropolitan area, I will be in Marietta, Georgia next week, the 25th of September, for an event recognizing Hispanic Heritage Month. I'm looking forward to being back there in Cobb County in Marietta, Georgia. As a matter of fact, my parents are both laid to rest in Marietta National Cemetery. So please come out next Wednesday, the 25th of September. If you want more information, go to theacru.org, theacru.org. I look forward to seeing you back in the place where I was born and raised, there in the Atlanta metropolitan area next week, Wednesday, the 25th of September. And as we sit here recording this segment of Live Free TV, it is the 17th of September, 1787, Constitution Day. I did find it kind of interesting that the last presidential debate was at the National Constitution Center and not a mention of the Constitution was made. But it was a day in which Benjamin Franklin challenged each and every one of us that we have a republic if we can keep it. And as I look at this republic and some of the challenges thereof, we have just seen a second attempt on the life of a former president and a current presidential candidate. So I could not think of anyone better to talk about the issues surrounding the Secret Service right now and protection of our chief executive or former chief executive than Mike Howell. Mike Howell is the executive director of the Oversight Project at the Heritage Foundation. Mike also served in the Department of Homeland Security, Office of the General Counsel, where he was the chief legal point of contact. He also did time on Capitol Hill, serving in the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs committees, as well as the House Oversight Committee. Mike, thank you so very much for taking your time to be with us here at Live Free TV.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You know, too often people look at things in the now, but one of the things I think that is important for us to understand is maybe some of the trends that we have seen over the years in the Secret Service that has brought us to this point. And that's why it's so great to have you on with us. So I want to go back to the December the 3rd, 2015 report. It was the bipartisan report on the Secret Service reveals an agency in crisis. You were part of that, being there at the Homeland Security, the Oversight Committee in the House. What have you seen over the years in this degradation of our United States Secret Service?
So the Secret Service has been fundamentally broken for a very long time. I'll truncate it a little bit and take us back to around 2013. A week or so after graduating law school, Senator Ron Johnson hired me to work on a Secret Service investigation, which I've basically been, working on for the past 12 years. And this was after a high-profile security incident in Cartagena, Colombia, where a bunch of Secret Service agents got drunk and got prostitutes the night before Obama was scheduled to go down there for a big visit. It was a huge incident which opened up a can of worms with a lot of whistleblowers that brought rise to a lot of other security incidents. Someone brought a gun into an elevator with Obama at the CDC. You had drunk agents running over suspicious, packages outside of the White House, all sorts of just bad behavior. And so ultimately the investigation moved to the House of Representatives, where it became a bipartisan investigation with the late Elijah Cummings on the Democrat side and Jason Chaffetz on the Republican side. And they put forth an exhaustive report, which I helped draft, which had a list of recommendations for the agency, ranging from everything, recruitment, staffing, technology, a bunch of security incidents, the culture there, and then the distracted structure of the dual mission of the agency, all things that played huge roles leading up to the assassination attempts, both of them, on President Trump. Things that Congress has already pointed out that has not solved. They haven't changed the legislative environment for the agencies. They just keep funding it with a little bit more than the year before, and the merry-go-round continues with a broken agency.
When you look at an agency being broken, it's just the same as serving in the military. You look at a unit that is having some issues. It starts with the leader. We used to have this, leadership manual talk about be, no, do as the leader, and everything flows down. What have you seen as far as the trends and troubling instances in the leadership at the head of the United States Secret Service?
So two main points there. The first is the distraction of the mission of the Secret Service. A lot of Americans expect the Secret Service to primarily and almost solely be focused on making sure the president doesn't get shot and killed. What they don't realize is the agency spends a lot more time investigating financial crimes and things that have no relation to that protective mission whatsoever. In fact, they have field offices around the world to do just that. And you ultimately get an agency who will raise their hand now, and Chuck Schumer is saying this, that it's a resources problem. No, it's fundamentally not. It's the fact that the Secret Service is allocating resources away from protection and more towards that financial crimes mission. And why? Because the career outcomes for agents is much better if you have that financial crime, resume. In fact, one of the recent departures as director is now this, head of security for Snapchat. And you would think that the Secret Service, they'd be in protection, but no, most of these agents go on to do that type of work. And so that's why they can never really solely focus on the protection. And the second thing is, the Secret Service keeps drawing their leadership from their own ranks. One of the things that both our report, in 15, and then also an external report called the Protective Mission Panel out of the executive branch have called for, is the need for fresh outside leadership to come in and challenge the existing culture. Right now, the Secret Service is being run by the number 2 of Kim Cheadle, who was just chased out of the agency. So nothing changes when you keep promoting from the senior ranks, and the agency is unwilling to kind of open its doors to a credible outsider to reorient and refocus the agency.
So, a thing I think you have to look at is the mission statement, the core competencies. Can you kind of give us a history of where the Secret Service started and where they are today as far as its core competencies, its mission? And do they need to have a restructuring, a refocus of that mission?
They absolutely do. They should be protection virtually only and focused on that and only things that advance the protective mission. Going back in history, the Secret Service, I believe the bill was on Abraham Lincoln's desk, actually, ironically enough, by the time he was assassinated. But it was an agency that was created to deal with counterfeiting currency running amok after the Civil War. You had all these Confederate monies floating around the economy, and counterfeiting was a huge problem. And so that's what the Secret Service was created to deal with. And so there's always been this element of financial crimes investigations. After a spate of, assassination attempts and successful ones of future presidents, the Secret Service kind of took on more of the protective mission. But the financial one never really went away. As counterfeiting became less of a problem, the Secret Service latched on to a credit card bill, I believe in the 70s, to reinterpret their mission to look at cyber financial crime, electronic crimes. And so that's why you have this agency with international field offices working on all these things, range from skimmers at gas stations that steal your credit card information, Bitcoin, scams, things like that you wouldn't think that they spend their time doing. But that's the real stuff that they want to do. They don't want to be just a bodyguard agency. But the problem is we need them to be a bodyguard agency, particularly now. And as we sit here on Constitution Day, the biggest threat to the Republic is the oldest one. It's assassination of, the political leadership. This is an ancient problem. We deserve a security posture that safeguards against it and is not distracted.
That's interesting you bring that up. So when we look at that financial aspect, and the Secret Service, I don't know if a lot of people understand it. It is part of the Department of Homeland Security. Shouldn't they be more so focused on these protective measures and protective mission? And maybe the U.S. Marshals or some other law enforcement agency, or maybe something under the Department of Commerce, they can be the ones that are looking at these financial issues. So how do we get to the point where we have that review of these, and it's not just the Secret Service, I think it's all across the government, a review of their task and purpose, their missions. But right now, especially, what do you recommend that we look at as far as restructuring and refocusing the Secret Service?
Right. We need to do everything in our power to get the Secret Service exclusively focused on protection and only doing things that advance that protective mission. There are a lot of synergies, as you just mentioned, between what the Marshals do, also what Capitol Police and Supreme Court protection do. But, there are separation of powers issues there. The point is, there are a lot of different entities in the government charged with safeguarding and protecting people that are potentially, could coordinate better and be consolidated better. What is obvious to me is that the Secret Service does not need to be doing a Treasury mission. And keep in mind, the agency used to be within the Department of Treasury up until 9/11 when the DHS was created and it was moved over there. Ultimately, the only one who can do that is Congress. Now, therein lies the problem. We don't have a Congress that really legislates. We have a Congress that already pointed these things out, in 2015 and in years before that. Instead, we have a very reactionary Congress that only wants to announce meaningless investigations that won't get any credible information or move the ball. And they do that solely to associate themselves with a high-profile conflict for media plays and political points. It's not a serious effort to make sure President Trump is safeguarded. If it were, the legislation would have already advanced that Congress has already identified. They've just lost any muscle memory and political will to actually legislate solutions to hard problems.
Thank you for correcting me. I misspoke when I said the Commerce Department. I meant to say the Treasury Department. And again, those of us that remember the series with Robert Conrad, The Wild Wild West, I mean, that's kind of, what they started out doing. But now, as you said, it has expanded. But really, they've got to refocus that mission. And that brings me to the Senator Josh Hawley, who just created his report. Again, do you see some of these issues, these glaring issues being resolved and being fixed, or will we have to wait for a new administration to do that?
I think you absolutely have to wait for a new administration. Right now, one of the proximate causes of the assassination attempt on President Trump, both of them are the Biden administration. They have created the conditions for these attempts to, be able to progress. They've basically incited a mob of a lot of mentally deranged people with things to activate them. They have flooded the security system of the United States in a way we've never seen before. I think we're in a worse posture than we were before 9/11 in terms of the open border, just broiling foreign conflicts, and then also creating this narrative arc of President Trump being an existential threat to democracy. Mm-hmm. You couple that with basically starving his detail and taking security apparatuses' eye off the ball of these threats for political reasons. They don't want to have to track or diagnose that they've caused a serious problem in terms of people foreseeably being activated by this rhetoric. I also suspect that if a true investigation is to occur, there are going to be some foreign connections to at least some of these assassination attempts. I mean, the most recent one, this guy was highly involved in a lot of foreign engagements, particularly as it relates to Ukraine and Russia. To me, it makes zero sense that that person would not have been on the intelligence community's radar. But I see an intelligence community that would, never, ever, point the force of the U.S. government at diminishing those threats. I think they created the conditions for the assassination attempt. They starved the detail, and it was completely foreseeable that it happened not once, but twice. And it's completely foreseeable that it'll happen again.
It's very interesting when you talk about the rhetoric. I live down here in Dallas, Texas area, and one of the U.S. members of the House of Representatives, Representative Jasmine Crockett, 2 hours before this most recent assassination attempt, she came out and talked about how, MAGA people are threats to a democracy. And of course, she was one of the members of Congress that tried to reduce the Secret Service protective detail. And we know about the Iranian threat when it comes to assassinations of the president. So what would be the message that you send to Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas right now about fixing or trying to fix, or at least trying to show that he would like to fix this issue?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of messages I'd like to send to Alejandro Mayorkas, and not just on the Secret Service, but as it relates to the protection of President Trump, he should give President Trump whatever he asked for as it relates to his protection. No more of rebuffing these requests to beef up the detail. President Trump should have the optionality to augment his detail with private security as well. There are a lot of patriots out here who are frankly better trained and equipped than, the Secret Service that's been bedeviled by this DEI hiring, which has made them just unqualified to do the job. And so Secretary Mayorkas should basically go to President Trump's team and say, you tell me what you need and you get it, and we'll work through anything else. We will empower you to the best of our ability and share all resources, all intelligence, those sorts of things. But of course, he will not. Mayorkas is part of the reason why there have been so many assassination attempts. He's the reason why we're in the worst security posture since before 9/11. He, and I say this on Constitution Day, is part of an administration that absolutely betrayed their oath of office by, for the first time in history, opening up the sovereignty of the United States to dangerous cartels and an invasion thereof. This guy is not interested in his job. He has clearly betrayed the mission, his duty, and his oath of office. And it's just hopefully only a matter of time before somebody who actually wants to do the job gets in there.
You're absolutely right. And I tell you, it is an incredible hypocrisy when you see someone that is charged with securing the homeland, but yet they're doing everything possible to undermine the security of the homeland. I have never seen a time when we have these, Venezuelan criminal gangs, MS-13, we have terrorists, we have all of these bad elements, we have more single military age males here illegally than we have the size of our active duty army. So going forward, if you had the opportunity to sit down with incoming President Trump, what would be your recommendations to incoming President Trump about restructuring Homeland Security, restructuring the Secret Service?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to make sure the agency is exclusively focused on protection. Recent events, prove that even more, that we need an agency solely committed to making sure the president isn't shot or killed. And that means, shelving this kind of financial crimes mission to another place. And there's a lot of other entities in government. You said Commerce, we'll add in Treasury, the FBI, others who can take on this kind of financial mission. And so all the resources need to be focused on keeping, President Trump alive. And, second to that, I think my recommendation would be to keep pushing on the Biden administration to de-weaponize. I mean, they're trying to throw President Trump in jail for the rest of his life. They're calling him a threat to, the existential future of the United States, a threat to, quote unquote, democracy. And I think, it is very clear to the American people when the administration, their propaganda media outlets, and other weaponized actors continue to put out these signals to a mentally unwell political base, that crazy people will act upon it. And so, heaven forbid there's another assassination attempt, but let the history books reflect that it is the radical left that created the conditions for these attempts to progress. And ultimately, if President Trump is shot at again, the fault won't just be with the shooter. These are foreseeable consequences of this rhetoric and the loosening of the conditions across the security apparatus, in particular, the starving of his detail. And so he needs to stay loud, vocal. He is probably the bravest American that I've ever seen after all of this to keep on powering through. I have no doubt he will. And so my recommendation to him is also to stay the course.
My last question to you, we've kind of talked about this, but I want to ask you directly, what type of damage has the focus on diversity done to the United States Secret Service?
A massive amount of damage. Diversity, equity, inclusion is just a terrible concept, adverse to meritocracy and the underpinnings of, the American Republic on its face. But it's really a pronounced problem when you start getting to life and death situations with agencies, carry guns with these important missions. The Secret Service has been absolutely out there as a leader on the DEI push. In fact, their annual report to Congress for 2023, in the message from the director, diversity is the most spoken about thing. They've completely reoriented the entire agency around this notion, especially with regard to women and hiring women who otherwise wouldn't be qualified or meet the same standards as men. They want to get to 30% by 2030. And so they're just flooding the system with unqualified applicants. And every American saw what that looked like in Butler, Pennsylvania, when one of the agents couldn't even holster her gun. She wasn't able to physically, cover President Trump. And so DEI, terrible concept, but it gets very dangerous at a place like the Secret Service. And Congress has been on notice for this for a while. The Secret Service has literally bragged to them about this. And it took an assassination attempt for them to wake up to it. But they need to legislate this problem away. Exposure for the sake of exposure is not what we need Congress to do. In fact, that's what we do at the Oversight Project at Heritage. That's what a lot of our friends do. That's what you do. We can talk about these things. We don't necessarily need Congress to talk about them. We need them to do something. And they have a funding deadline coming up. We'll see if anything changes.
Mike, I just want to thank you so much, Mike Howell, for joining us here on this episode of Live Free TV. How can people follow you and stay in touch with the work you're doing there as part of the Oversight Project at the Heritage Foundation?
Best way is on X. Our team's at Oversight PR. That's the letters PR. And I'm at M. Howell Tweets.
Well, happy Constitution Day to you, and thanks for all you do to make sure that it's a republic and you are doing everything possible to keep it. God bless you.
You as well. Thank you.